Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. You know that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today we're going to be discussing mouthwashing. The game, it's not just an activity that you maybe do once to twice a day. Pete, how often do you mouthwash?
I honestly don't, but I am a fanatical flosser. I'm always flossing.
Always be flossing.
Mm.
Thank you, one Pete Busby, the floss
Wait.
master.
Yep, I have more to add. I have
Yes?
a rare topical fun fact for this week's podcast. Yeah, I have some facts about the Pony Express.
Yay!
Yep. So the Pony Express, despite its place in America's cultural consciousness, wasn't around that long. It only lasted from April of 1860 to October of 1861. And during that time, it was a financial flop. The owners lost as much as $200,000, which for 1860 was a whole buttload of money. But the thing I found the most interesting about the Pony Express is that there was a weight limit for the riders. Any men, and I think it was almost exclusively men, who rode for the Pony Express could only be up to 125 pounds. Not that large.
I heard somebody did a comment on my stream, my VOD of mouthwashing, that the Pony Express actually employed a lot of orphans because they were small. Child labor was cool as hell back then, and also if they died on the way, no one would miss them.
Yep. None of that sounds surprising. Apparently, the youngest person to claim they were part of the Pony Express was Bronco Charlie Miller, who says he was 11 years old when he joined up.
Time to start working, kid.
Mhm.
Freeloader.
I don't know what took him so long.
Yeah.
Not enough job openings at the factories.
Yeah, they didn't have enough openings in the mines for kids of small enough size to fit in bad holes. That other
I'm
voice
here
you heard
too.
is one Jess O'Brien. How you doing, Jess?
Hello, it's Jess Voidburger O'Brien. I'm really burnt out, but I'm keep on keeping it on. That's
Mhm.
good job talking.
If people wanted to find you on the internet, where would they do so?
Voidburger at everything, on so many things. Mostly Blue Sky, I suppose.
And also Skulltenders?
Yes, Skull Tenders is something that I'm very proud of and should be listened to. It is a D&D powered actual play, radio play, basically. Lots and lots of sound effects. It's too much work, but it's very good. So please make it worth it for me and listen to it and give me compliments. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, before we get into the mouthwashing of it all, a horror video game with a great name, our normal plugs, reminder, you can get in touch with the show, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, and then deeplistens.libsyn.com, where you have our comment sections that you could get in touch with. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. At the $3 tier, you get access to the OG Songcast. Pete, what are you guys covering on the OG Songcast? Which anime are you watching?
Gino, that is a good question. It's one we are all very excited about and that I think about every day and remember the name of constantly. Nope, that's the game we played last. It is 2001 Boogie Pop Phantom.
Yes. So you can get access to that and listen to that shortly. And then you also get access to the Discord, where we've got our Discord folks chatting it up in there. You could learn about all sorts of fun things, like we were on a list, apparently.
Woo!
The
List.
good kind?
A good
Yeah.
kind, not the government kind.
Oh,
The
okay.
good kind. So apparently we made it to some sort of listicle of game, like book clubby podcasts. So
Aw, good for you guys. Deserved.
I asked, I was like, hey, there's new people here. How'd you find the show? And they were like, this list. And I was like, what? We're on a list?
Aw,
I can't believe it.
lovely. Hello, new people.
Yeah. So support the show if you can. We would much appreciate it. If we get up to 40 patrons, we'll play Duke Nukem Forever.
We will.
Ooh.
That we will. We will afflict
Condolences
ourselves with that.
slash congratulations for the future.
Like, we just played Mass Effect Andromeda recently as a punishment slash reward. So this is also that. And speaking of getting in touch with the show, we had a couple of emails. One of them
Ooh.
was specifically for basketball, and I will get to that email when we do our next basketball podcast after the trade deadline.
I mean, not much is happening in the league these days. Not a lot of info.
Yeah, so we will get to that. And for those of you who are listening right now, the Luka Doncic trade just happened hours before we recorded this. So we have takes, but I'm holding off on them. But this email comes in from William. Hey, Deep Listens crew. I apologize for multiple emails this week. The other email is the basketball one that we're not reading right now. But the topic of advertising before and after the shows was brought up during the episode about Danganronpa. Gino, I was not troubled by the content of the advertisements. However, I was troubled by the concept of the advertisements. Pete, what would Karl Marx have to say to us now that we are helping turn the wheels of capitalism? Moreover,
gosh.
if advertisements are to be continued and revenue to be generated of our podcast, what will we do with our surplus of value? I suggest that funds be used for our new Deep Listens community jet ski. However, I have alternate ideas for the use of our profits. I would love to hear them. Your faithful comrade, XXX420, Hammer and Sickle 69, XXX.
Sure. Well, I mean, Karl Marx, noted jet ski enthusiast, so he would definitely be on board with that. I will say I don't have a great answer because advertising, as we know it, didn't really exist in the age of Karl Marx. Sort of like a function of factory-produced, sort of homogenous goods. But he would hate it, obviously. Why would he like it?
I mean, if we hate it, I think people from the old past would hate it too.
Yeah,
Almost
checks
Even
out.
more.
Yeah, and we will see if putting ads on the show does anything. If it doesn't, I'll just turn them off. It's just that simple. I don't know how much revenue an ad even generates on a show this small. If it's nothing, then I'll just turn it off. And if it's something and it helps people pay for the games that we play on the show, then it'll be a thing that, you should listen to all of them. But if you didn't, I wouldn't know. Just to say. All right, getting to mouthwashing. Pete,
Yes.
what's mouthwashing?
What is mouthwashing? That is a good question. So mouthwashing takes place on a what would you call it? Like intergalactic, or the very least space freighter, like big ship named the Tulpar, which, bonus fun fact, is a legendary winged or celestial horse in Turkish mythology. Sort of like
Oh.
Pegasus.
That's sick.
Cool.
That's a good
Yeah.
name for a pony. A
Makes
ship
sense.
running for the Pony Express, which is the name of the shipping company.
Yep.
Um,
And let me real time correction here. Not Turkish, Turkic, which I don't know if that's different. I apologize to any Turkic people in our audience if we have any, but basically a Pegasus in a different kind of mythology.
I see.
Cool.
Yeah. Moving on. The Tulpar has a crew of, we'll call it 5. But we come in the story sort of in media res. Basically, what's happening is there is an imminent imminent space crash into an asteroid, and it seems like you're involved in that in one capacity or another. And then the story sort of unfolds in a non-chronological jump around manner to explain sort of how we arrived at this crash, how we're living after the crash, and sort of, what happens then.
Yeah. What caused the crash to happen? How are people surviving after the crash? How will this ship get to some sort of safe port or not? So I guess just a first question here of the setting, right? It's space truckers, fundamentally.
Yes.
Space truckers transporting cargo that they do not know what it is. And they are kept in fairly awful conditions for this long journey.
Yep.
Any idea, Jess or Pete, why space trucker is it's such a default setting for a horror setting? I feel like I've seen many different movies or pieces of media where space trucking gone wrong has one of the main themes. Why is this the job du jour for the far-flung future?
I think that it has something to do with going against the grain of sci-fi being clean and sciency and for smart people, like the aesthetic of all of it, like Star Trek and Star Wars. Also, just everything's really white and clean. And I remember, like, hearing about like some sort of behind the scenes commentary on Alien, that they went with like this kind of greasy oil riggy like look for the Nostromo as like a pivot away from that like squeaky clean sort of thing. So I think it's going from this like upper classy, nice and clean thing to, working man, get dirt under your fingernails type of job.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I would echo that
why?
analysis. They need a way to explain why like non-astronauts would be in space if you want this sort of everyman motif.
Yeah, I think it's an empathy thing to like
Yeah.
have, relatable characters. Like if they're a bunch of snooty diplomats on some fancy ship that's getting overrun by a real scary dude, it's like, would you relate to that so much, or would you be rooting for the alien there?
There's like a long sort of cultural history of like, I'm no expert in this by any means, but like the trucker in America as sort
Mm,
of the extension of the cowboy almost, sort of like this
yeah,
lone operator crisscrossing the wilderness by their,
it's like
wits and skills and guile and whatnot.
it's
So
like
it
a
makes sense
noble
to,
profession.
yeah, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So it makes sense to sort of put that into a space context as, if we think of space as the final frontier, it's a literal
Mm-hmm.
extension of the American West in
Mm-hmm.
some sense.
Yeah, and I
I
guess it
agree.
also gives a reason, like you said, for non-astronauts, non-scientists, non-geniuses to be in space. Like the characters that we're dealing with here are, let's see, we've got Daisuke, who's basically a college intern.
Yeah.
You've got Swansea, who is an engineer, but you know, like a plumber, basically, like a space
Yeah,
plumber.
mechanic. Yeah.
Um, yeah, he
He's
is.
more
He's not
world
a high
weary.
level. Yes, he's an alcoholic engineer who, um, he's not doing science experiments or anything. You've got Curly, who's a captain, and we don't know too much about Curly as a captain, I would say, because stuff happens to him very early on. Um, you've got Jimmy, who is the co-pilot, and doesn't seem to be especially good at it either.
Mm.
And you've got Anya, who's a nurse who can't administer medicine to people. So like all of these people seem like they are who was available, who was willing to go on a long space flight. Um,
Yeah. And it's a really long space flight. What was it, like a whole
Over a
year?
year. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just the way there. Then you have to come back, presumably.
True.
That
yeah,
sucks.
yeah, and
It's like
I
it
think
feels
it's
like a
also
job where you have to be desperate to take it, right?
100%.
There's
And
got to be better jobs in the future than this.
and just to accentuate that, like in a lot of these space truckery sort of movies or pieces of media, the truckers themselves probably are not awake the whole time. They're like
Hmm.
in cryo, or they
Yeah.
wake up just to touch the ship every once in a while. These folks are just kind of awake. They've got cryo, but it's only there for emergencies if you're gonna die or something. So they are awake every single moment of this completely, like, you can't even tell day from night because you're in space. Like they've got a monitor that displays images that kind of give the implication of a time cycle, but really every moment feels the same as the last.
You know what's
Um,
crazy? I noticed that there's not even any windows to look at space. It's
yes.
just like
Hmm.
it's like a submarine.
You think that would
All
be like the
monitors.
main draw of space too? Like it'd be looking at space. Maybe it's get boring though. A lot of it is empty.
It's true. But I mean, it just makes it feel even more claustrophobic that you can't even look outside of the
Yeah.
ship. Like, woof.
Yeah.
They do not care about the well-being of these people on this ship, the company.
No. To
No.
that end too, we're we're being run by the Pony Express. That's the company that's operating this shipping endeavor. And there are multiple posters around of their pony mascot saying things like, "Don't sleep more than 5 hours a day or we'll dock your pay."
Hmm.
Yeah. I would say the most ubiquitous thing on the ship are workplace propaganda posters. Like,
Another
don't
parallel with aliens is just like fuck the company. Like this company sucks.
Yeah, and we find out pretty early on as well that the company is not doing well. Um, they can only underpay and hire interns for so long. So this might be one of the last shipments that they send. Um, which I think now we could get into some of the actual events. So Pete, like you said, there was an asteroid making a collision course. Um, you take control of someone who is in the cockpit, and the first thing you do is set the ship on collision course with the asteroid, and then
Mhm.
lock in that coordinate.
I love
Um,
that. Like that you had no choice but to do it. And
yeah,
like you're not familiar with these controls or anything, but you're like, this seems bad. Why am I doing this?
yeah. There's no choice to do anything else. You lock it in, and there's then just an explosion. Like that is how the game opens, and kudos to them on that setup. Like what a cool opening to a horror game. Um, when you come to after the explosion, it is you're kind of in this shared space that's got a big screen on it. And I believe you have to go give pills to the captain who is in bandages, who you presume, set the ship on this course.
Yeah,
Pete, describe
I
Curly,
was
please.
yeah, I was about to. Not just bandages. So Curly's swaddled in bandages with only one eye and his teeth showing. He's got no eyelid on that eye. Looks like he's
No
been
no skin.
no skin, very severely burned. No skin, no limbs left either. So Curly's in rough shape.
It's basically what happened to Big Boss in MGS5. Like they just
Yes.
have a biomort, I think they called him. They just have this like limbless, horrible, suffering creature that used to be this guy.
Yeah. He is burned beyond all recognition. He cannot communicate either. He just stares at you with his one unblinking eye, incredibly bloodshot. Um, and when you go to see him, you are giving him pain pills to basically keep him from screaming and squirming. Um, and to do that, I guess Anya, who is the nurse, she does not feel comfortable giving it to him because she doesn't like the sound of him swallowing his pills. So you, as Jimmy, who is the second in command, you have to then do it. Um, how did how do you actually feed him the pills, Pete?
We don't
Remember,
necessarily. Well, you have to wait until his mouth is open. If you
you
try
have
to
to
do it
open
while
it.
it's
You have
closed,
to
yeah,
open it yourself.
yep. And then
Click
the
on him.
screen cuts to black, and you hear a series of horrible squishing mouth noises and moans and groans, and
Just
it's horrible.
choking him down, choking
Yeah,
these nasty big pills down with no water.
it's immediately obvious why Anya doesn't like to do it.
Well, I don't know. She's a nurse, right? Like she went to nursing school,
True.
but I feel like, and I read this like take somewhere else, so don't credit me with it. Uh, I read that like Anya's like making Jimmy do it, like pretending she can't do it because
Mm.
she wants him to like suffer, which obvious reasons. We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into why that might be the case for sure. Um, so I guess one thing also to call out about Anya, very Shirley Duvall in The Shining look
Shelley
to
Yes,
Anya,
Duvall. Mm.
yes.
which maybe that's relevant on this ship that's stuck in space, drifting with no contact to the outside world. Maybe it isn't. um, but yeah, so you feed Curly, and then you're kind of bouncing around. I guess I skipped like there's a sequence where you basically do some PT stuff. Um, Jess, do you remember that?
Yeah, it's basically like right after you set the crash course, and before it actually everything explodes, is that you're going through a bunch of hallways that seemingly don't go anywhere. They go in loops. Sound familiar? And the mascot of the Pony Express is heavily, heavily featured in the imagery. The hallucinations of this particular well, both folks we're going to deal with here. There's a lot of Polly, the horse, showing up, uh, and there was weird like baby noises happening during this. Really good sound design, gotta say, fucking brilliant. And yeah, we will see a bunch more trippy hallucinatory sequences that are super cool.
Yeah, and those sorts of sequences will cut in a number of different places and kind of change up the pacing of the gameplay. So when we're kind of back in the present, we've got to check on things. Jimmy is now in charge. Swansea has shut off the engineering bay and told everyone that it is too full of foam. You can't go in there. Daisuke is...
So the foam is like a crash
Oh, right.
protection thing that makes sure
Yes.
that there's no open. It seals off any potential leaks to space.
Yeah,
Makes
yeah.
sense.
Basically, all of the ship, because of the collision, anything that was damaged has this foam in it. So your space, the area that you can walk around in the ship was already not big, but now it is even smaller because of the foam everywhere. Swansea says you can't go into the main, the engineering room because it's too full of foam. You've got a little bit of access to the nursing quarters, but Curly's in there just kind of writhing. You got the common room, which did either of you check out the menu for the food that they have to eat?
Oh, of course.
How would you describe the food options?
Sparse, cheap, not food, borderline not food.
Yeah, there's water, gelatin, and sweetener. Those are the three things, and you can combine them to make food, drinks, or if you've been a good boy, you can use the sweetener, and then you can get a cake or a alcoholic drink.
Yeah. You only get one cake a year, though, if I understood that correctly.
That's one
For
cake
the
and one
communal
cocktail.
birthday party,
Yep.
which is so fucking sad.
Yeah, and we do eventually get a flashback to Curly, the ship's captain, having the communal birthday because it is, they draw straws basically every year on whose birthday, quote unquote, it is when they get to have a cake. But yeah, it's these packages that you just put into a machine and then it kind of like puts a cloth over it, and then when it pulls the cloth away, it's like there's food here now. Congratulations.
Ta-da!
Ta-da.
But yeah, that's pretty bleak. The screen that is showing you the daytime, nighttime's pretty bleak. Also, everyone is now sleeping in this one room because it's the only room that seems to have any sort of hospitality to it. The rest is kind of, it looks almost like a boiler works, I would say, right? The interior of the ship.
Yeah, not much was spent on decor.
Yeah, we don't get
No.
to see the crew quarters. I assume they were foamed, so they probably can't get in there.
Yeah, so at this point, the passengers on the ship, Anya, Swansea, Daisuke, they tell Jimmy, who's the acting captain, we got to open up the cargo because maybe we were shipping something that can help us so we don't die in space. Because they're running out of food, and they might run out before they get to their destination.
They will never get to their destination. They're waiting for people to notice they're missing and go find them in the infinite void of space.
Right. Correct. They're even more hopeless than that because their ship is too damaged to travel. So they decide to crack open the cargo bay, which introduces one of the only real mechanics in the game, the decoder. Pete, the captain's decoder? How would
Yeah,
you
yeah.
describe it?
It's more or less like a black light. Like you shine it on things and you see, mostly it's hidden numbers. So you can type in that code and like get into unaccessible areas otherwise. But later in the game, it'll also show bloodstains, perhaps other spooky things.
Yeah. So, Jess, what's in cargo? Is it helpful?
No, it's not helpful. It's a shitload of mouthwash, like enough for a whole planet. Like it is
Yep.
it's like the warehouse from the end of Indiana Jones in there. It's huge and it's all just mouthwash. So what a bad joke. My God, those poor people.
Yeah, it
Although
is.
Swansea's excited because
Yeah,
there
he's
was some
pumped.
alcohol content in there, and he's like, "Oh, fuck yeah, I get to drink myself to death. That rules."
Yeah. So, like the mouthwash, You get a commercial for Dragon. It's like Dragon's Breath brand mouthwash, and basically the crew decides to crack into the mouthwash to drink their troubles away. But I mean, it's still mouthwash, so even though there's alcohol in there, it seems like it's not good for people. Um,
No, it's not the right kind of like. I mean, it's ethanol. You can drink it, but it's not what you want.
You're gonna go blind eventually.
Yeah.
It's like drinking Sterno. Don't do it. You can get drunk if you decide to drink Sterno, but don't.
yeah, and the same. You also get a situation where you have to get more pain pills for Curly, and in that pain pill, you need to basically hack away at some foam to get at these extra pain pills, and there's ethanol in there as well. Which are you able to try and feed Curly ethanol instead of pain medication? I didn't try.
Neither did I actually.
I tried to use the mouthwash and I got a achievement for it. That didn't work. So
Oh, okay. Because it felt like Jimmy, you're having like flashbacks, and it seems like Jimmy and Curly maybe had a falling out. Um, Sometimes you're controlling Jimmy, sometimes you're controlling Curly. And Curly finds out early on that this is his last trip, basically, right? Like the company's going under, and everyone's going to lose their jobs.
mhm.
Do we find out why Jimmy is so mad at Curly for the company going under?
I think well, Jimmy has some reasons he doesn't want to go home, which we'll certainly get to. But I think it's generally Jimmy is resentful of Curly because Jimmy's life is such a dead end, and Curly seems to be doing so much better than him. That seems like his
Yeah.
main motivation, which honestly seems pretty flimsy to kill a whole bunch of people. But like I said,
Well,
there is more going on.
he's not a good person, this
Oh
guy.
no.
He
Oh no.
sucks. But yeah, his resentments at his own inadequacies really get out of hand. And he projects that on other people, and he projects competence on himself. He's the one that ought to be in charge anyway. He's taking responsibility. And yeah, he super resents his friend, Curly, who probably got him this job to begin with.
Oh, most
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, and Curly is like when this trip is over, Curly's like in line for a promotion or to even move on to a different job because he feels like he reached like the top rung of this ladder, and the world is kind of his oyster regarding the choice of where to work, and it's implied that like everyone else on this ship, it's not a choice. Like they are poor. They don't have any other career prospects. Like everyone's a fuck up on here except Curly, so it's a little natural for him to resent this successful guy.
Yeah, 100%. And Curly, it seems like there might be a psychic break going on with Curly too. Like he has to take a psych evaluation.
I think
And
that was a standard.
They all do.
Yeah.
well, it was a standard, but I remember when you're controlling Curly, you do get some like cutaways to, I guess, black and white words floating in the air.
So like the transitions are wonderful between the past and the present. They're very glitchy and weird and trippy. And Curly's like trippy parts, I think there's only like 2 or something. Like a lot of them are Jimmy's. But on the way to give Jimmy his psych eval, because Anya didn't want to do it for reasons we'll get into, he has like this incredible hallucination of like these like warning signs. Like he's in this vast ocean just walking on water, and all these warning signs are coming up, and these ladders are shooting up out, and like there's a huge explosion on the horizon, which is foreshadowing. And then like the conversation that he has with Jimmy is about how he reached the top of his career ladder and all that stuff. It's like, oh, I see what they're doing.
Yeah. Do you think we're supposed to take those moments as Curly having a psychic break in real time, or as kind of an artistic foreshadowing? That we're kind of operating outside of the narrative structure when those sorts of things happen.
I'm not super sure, because Curly seemed to have it pretty much together. He didn't seem unhinged the way that Jimmy seems a little unhinged. So, it's not that it feels out of place, though. like
Yeah.
No.
thematically, you know.
Yeah, the whole thing's pretty trippy. You could make a similar argument too that due to like the messed up chronology of the story, this could be Curly after the fact, like
Mm,
post explosion and dismemberment. Because I mean, Curly obviously goes through a lot. If he had a mental break after that, it wouldn't be unreasonable.
yeah, maybe it's Curly's memories because all he can do is sit there and be in pain and can't
Yeah.
communicate with anybody.
Yeah, I think that all of them are in play. And I asked the question because I think it's part of what makes this game successful is that there's that ambiguity.
Mhm.
You know, like some of these moments are spooky unto themselves. Some of them seem to be narrative structure. You know, characters ruminating on things they've done. And some of them just seem like maybe this is just trippy. You know, it's trippy for the sake of being
Yeah.
trippy, or it's outside of the time and space because this game's storytelling is not super linear. Um, but I like that they play with that ambiguity. Like they're not super wedded to reality and linear storytelling for their scares.
Mhm.
Um,
I also really appreciate how long individual scenes are in this game. Like it always feels
mhm.
like
Mm.
it doesn't feel like they're leaving you on a cliffhanger per se, but they kind of always leave you like on the edge of your seat wanting to hear the next line and you don't get to hear it. And I think that kind of keeps the like anxiety high in a way. I don't know.
Mhm. I agree. And I think to your point, Jess, about how glitchy the transitions are, like it's not just that they're glitchy. It feels glitchy because the game just stops letting you control it abruptly and then will I mean, almost like a wipe sometimes. That pixels will start bleeding and then you'll just wake up someplace else. Um, so the transitions just directly wrench control away from you to make these
Mm,
transitions happen.
Not
I think
every
it makes it more
not
effective.
every time.
But some of the times, enough
It just
times.
they do just like pop up like they're scripted obviously, but like
Mhm.
you can move your mouse and like change the data mosh that's happening and stuff like that. So it's really neat.
Yeah, it's a really cool effect when they use it. Um, yeah, you're continuing. Jimmy is continuing to try and quote unquote help the ship. Like you've got this new captain's controls. It doesn't really get you access to that much. Uh, ultimately, like it gets you access to the mouthwash
And the gun.
The
and the
gun.
gun. Right, you eventually get a gun, and in a flashback, you see Curly use this to get an axe. What were they opening with the axe the first time?
They were
Uh
getting Dice K out of the foam. He had
Right.
foamed himself.
He foams himself because he's a dumb intern, and you
Yep.
need to.
he's lovely. What a nice boy. Like everyone loves Dice K.
Which
Yeah.
like so the implication is Dice K comes from like a wealthy family and his mom more or less set up this internship for him. I have to imagine that Dice K's rich family could have gotten him something better. Like how is
I
this the
know,
only thing
right?
available to him?
Maybe he's just that dumb. Like I don't know.
It's got big like our loser son. We need to send him away to boarding school.
Hmm.
Sort of energy. Like, oh, we're sending him away to learn a trade. He's going to be an engineer. He's away on the Pony Express with the toolpar. It'll be great when he comes back, a full man.
2 years later.
Yeah.
I don't want to see my son for 2 years. I'm getting him an internship.
Yeah, and the important part of that axe is after you free Daisuke, Swansea commandeers the axe, and that is his axe from now on, which may be important later. Are there any flashbacky moments or hallucination moments you want to? This kind of middle period. There's a few different scenes, but anything that jumps out to you, Jess?
I want to talk about the birthday party
Oh yes.
because this comes right after Curly receives like a fax from corporate that is bad news, and the fax like tells him not to tell the crew until they're closer to their destination. And he should have listened to the facts.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
really, one of his worst moves as a captain, gotta say, direct harm wise, should not have told the crew because he immediately tells the crew at the birthday party and ruins everyone's lives. Everyone's out of a job when they land, and they don't know what to do. Anya has like no savings account. Like everyone's fucked. And Jimmy gets even more insanely resentful because Curly's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Asshole.
Yeah. If you're going to tell people that they're going to lose their job, do it when you're not locked in a tin can with them in space for months on end.
Duh.
Yeah. So
Come
Curly
on.
screws up bad. Go ahead, Pete.
All these people are pretty, let's just say they all have their own problems, right? And I have to imagine the implication is that like Pony Express didn't do any vetting, right? That they just picked whoever was around because they're cheap.
Yeah, they're
Because I mean, any
desperate.
reputable, any
Yeah.
reputable organization would have like, let's make sure these people can handle, 2 years in a tin can together.
Mm-hmm. Which is like, why they're doing the psych evals, but they don't like take them very seriously, obviously. Like,
But also,
They
like,
don't go anywhere.
what do
Yeah.
what do you do if they fail the psyche eval when they're
I
on the
know, right?
space like the space can in the middle of nowhere? Like, one of the implications is no one can get to. You're in the middle of nowhere. There's no fancy, faster than light, ships, just showing up next to you. This isn't Star
it's
Wars or something.
It's too late to find out if you're psychologically fit for this trip.
Yeah,
That
like if
ship has
Anya
sailed.
if Anya has a break, what do we do with her? She's the nurse. She's the only person who could do medicine on the whole place. Like, you just gotta deal with her having a breakdown. There's no alternative. But yeah, like they do a very good job of making Pony Express seem particularly ghoulish in how they operate things, and mostly just like you said, Pete, slapdash. Like they just do not care. They need to move this mouthwash from one part of the galaxy to another.
That is the mouthwash is a nice touch too. That like it's something so trivial and unimportant that they're throwing all these people's lives away more or less
Yeah.
to move.
It's not food, it's not medicine. It's fucking something nobody needs to live.
Yeah, and it's so much of it.
It's so goddamn much of it. It's like millions and millions of bottles of mouthwash.
The other amazing thing, I mean, I think when you open that cargo bay is how much of the ship is the cargo bay?
Right? Jesus.
Like how little room there is for the humans to move around. You will learn the ship like the back of your hand in like 20 minutes because there's nowhere else to go. And then the cargo bay seems to stretch on for infinity. So they couldn't even imagine, they couldn't even give a playroom to these people. Nothing.
I think the room that they're sleeping in is kind of supposed to be that, I guess, but it's like a rec room and it looks like it's from the 70s and there's not like much to do there. There's like 4 books. Like you're going to read those like in 2 months. Like what the fuck?
There's a machine that spits out cakes sometimes, but only once a year.
Gelatin.
There was like a vending machine that had like I forget what it vended, but it was like out of whatever that food was, like peanuts or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and also it's a vending machine, so these people are paying their wages. It's like trapping someone in the company store for 2 years.
There's a big mascot. There's a big Polly in there that says stuff at you. Like if you have time to lean, you have time to clean or something like that kind of shit that managers tell you. It's like, "Ooh, no."
There was like sort of a mid-moment scene that I didn't quite understand that I wanted to bring up. And I'm not even sure exactly how to describe it. I think you're in the cargo hold, or at least you're wandering around a vast empty space, and every once in a while a spectral horse descends from the ceiling to menace you basically. And that's more or less it. I mean, that's pretty much what happened. And very trippy, very clear, like something's wrong with this person I'm walking around in right now. But I wasn't sure exactly what I was supposed to take away from it.
Yeah,
It's very
so
mysterious.
Yeah.
The horse imagery comes up a lot, and I think it represents responsibility, which is a very, very huge theme of this game. Horses are very responsible animals. I don't know, but they're
Sure.
reliable. They're cargo bringers, beasts of burden, and stuff like that. And it kind of like Jimmy is supposed to be responsible for a lot, and he doesn't take responsibility like at all. We haven't gotten to like the big thing that makes him the biggest asshole alive. should I say?
Yeah, so just before we get to the reveal, that sequence you were talking about, Pete, you start by like walking down a hallway in a otherwise normal sequence, and then you look and there's a gravestone where the cargo bay is supposed to be, and if you walk towards that, then you end up in this trippy sequence. I just wanted to ask, could either of you read what it said on the tombstone?
Oh, if
I
I
don't
did, I
remember if I
forget.
did. Yeah.
It was too pixelated for me to even read it, so I wasn't sure if it was just me or if it was illegible. But yeah, then you end up following basically a bloody trail with this horse menacing you. And just what is the thing that Jimmy? Well, there are many things he's responsible for, but I think there's one in particular you were aiming for.
Yeah, trigger warning. Jimmy raped Anya at some point during this trip. And like that information is like slowly getting leaked to the other members of the crew. And obviously Anya is terrified of Jimmy. She commandeered the gun at some point and hid it to keep it away from him. And also like, in case we got to take down Jimmy. And the responsibility of having a baby in the mix. This trip has more than 8 months left on it. Let's just say. So this is a really, really big problem. In addition to it being a really, really horrible thing to begin with, that sexual assault occurred on this wretched vessel, and Curly kind of turned a blind eye to a lot of the warning signs because Jimmy is his friend. He's a good guy. Not worried about him. Asshole.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's a number of different things here. One, there's 4 cryo bays on this ship. There's 5. There were already 5 people, so there weren't enough cryo bays for the number of people if anything went wrong. But on top of that, now there's going to be a 6th person functionally. I assume that with how slapdash this whole ship is, there's not enough food for a 6th mouth or anything like that. There's no facilities for anything for having a kid, giving birth, treatment, anything like that. This ship is equipped for just adult people and barely that. So you could see how terrible it is just from a logistics perspective. Then there's the moral component, which is Jimmy is in charge now because Curly is injured. And it seems there's only 4 people on the ship that are functional once Curly's rendered incapacitated. You think they haven't figured stuff out or they don't talk? So, like, all of the earlier scenes where Swansea is giving Jimmy lip about him being in charge, or, like, Dice Guy doesn't seem to put things together. I don't know.
He's pretty
so
oblivious.
Dumb. He's
Yeah.
so dumb.
Dice Guy hasn't put anything together, but Anya making Jimmy give the medicine to Curly. Swansea just being pretty openly defiant of Jimmy asserting any sort of control.
That's why he has the axe the entire time. He's not giving him that fucking axe.
Yep, he's not giving Jimmy the axe. Like, basically, everyone seems to be treating Jimmy like a jerk, and early in the game, you don't know why. And the further in you get, the more you realize, oh, everyone knows that Jimmy's a piece of shit rapist, and that he's in charge because of chain of command. But also, there's no one to enforce chain of command. They're floating around in a tin can in space, slowly starving.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is just 4 people getting at each other's. Well, I should say 3 people getting at each other's throats, and Daisuke, who's the best boy.
Who's an angel on Earth and off Earth and does not deserve this.
Yeah. So as things go on, we keep jumping back and forth to like further on when the ship is really messed up. Like there's an axe buried. There's a giant like crack in the screen that used to be showing you whether it was supposed to be day or night or afternoon.
Oh yeah, Swansea just like does that during a cutscene.
Yeah. Jimmy asks for the axe so that he can dig away at some foam. I think that's when you get the extra pills. You ask Swansea for the axe.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's like, sure, you can have it, and he shoves the axe into the screen and breaks it.
I can't believe they let Curly continue to live. Like,
Yeah.
My God, like at a certain point, like is mercy killing on the table? How in the world is this guy alive to begin with? Obviously, suspension of disbelief. But it's like, is this ethical to, keep this man alive? Because they do think he was the one that did this. He's being
Yes.
framed, basically. Spoiler alert: Curly did not crash the ship. Jimmy did, because Jimmy's a bad man who wants to take everyone down with him. And it's like, for some reason, like, it's never talked about, like, should we just kill this poor wretched guy who's like not going to recover from this, and
Yeah,
he's eating all of our medicine.
so again, take YouTube comments with a grain of salt. But the theory I saw on that was more or less Jimmy's orchestrating this as some sort of continued revenge against Curly. Like he wants Curly alive and suffering because he hates him so much. But no, I think like the other three people should have banded together and been like, this is obviously terrible. But it seems like Jimmy has more or less psychologically, I don't know, bombarded. I'm not sure the word I want. Psychologically manipulated them enough such that he can get his way.
They're scared of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Because he's
reasonable.
terrible. And
Yeah.
he's got the little decoder, so he has access to stuff on the ship no one else does. Though being the captain just means holding that decoder functionally, right? There's nothing. The ship can't fly. There's nothing that Jimmy has a special skill that makes him in charge, other than people allowing it. Really, there's no reason why he should be in charge. Anyone but
Hierarchy.
Daisuke
Yeah.
should be in charge.
Yeah.
Probably Swansea.
I think like this game's saying a lot, obviously, about corporate structure and all that stuff, and I think like the hierarchical absurdity of this situation, the fact that they don't mutiny against this horrible guy who's making horrible decisions all the time, and just slam him in one of the cryo things, which are mostly destroyed anyway. I think that's part of like what the game's like doing here.
Yeah, that once you establish a hierarchy, people are more likely to blame themselves or do something overtly destructive than actually challenge the hierarchy itself.
Yeah, and Jimmy has this whole, situation going on with responsibility and taking responsibility. So him being the captain, he's like pretending like, he's a martyr for taking on this responsibility. I have to do this for you guys. Not like he made this situation, made it as bad as it is. He wanted this.
Yeah, 100%. He created this situation and then acts as though everyone else foisted it upon him, and that he's being magnanimous to even be caring about anyone else. So we talked a little bit about that ghostly horse situation, that stealth sequence? There's two of these kind of sequences, one with the horse, one with, man, what would you even call it? Like a big baby? Centipede?
It was a centipede made out of poly parts and making baby noises. And reminder that the very first trippy sequence was the PT hallway with like all of the poly imagery and all of the baby crying noises. So poly is getting mixed up with the, pregnancy and baby imagery, which is why I think it's just the nebulous horror of responsibility. Because it's like you've got the responsibility of like, you are going to be a, parent, I guess, if like, but it's like a rape situation. So obviously not. And, along with all the captain bullshit he's doing, and secretly knowing that he is to blame for all of this and is in mega denial about it. It's like, it's really fun imagery. It's really strange.
Yeah, and but beyond the imagery, did you enjoy playing the stealth parts?
I did.
I didn't dislike it. I mean, I don't know that it like added much that I was like, ooh, gameplay. But I wasn't like aghast for the like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes it happens.
Yeah, they're not very long. I feel like nothing overstays its welcome in this game. It's very, very well paced.
No, it is very tight.
Yeah,
It's like
for
3
sure.
hours long, basically. It's a, one session situation.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I found them to be the most fiddly parts of the game. Especially there's a sequence where a Swansea is coming at you with an axe. Very very The Shining.
Hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
and that sequence, because you actually have to point a gun and shoot him. It's the most like mechanically dense part of the game, I'd say.
It's the most
Um,
video gamey part, yeah.
yeah, for sure. And it jumps out like that. The game is not. I mean, it's not terrible at it. It just felt very different from the rest of the experience, where you're just kind of generally using item on item. And when I say using item on item, it's usually like use water on gelatin to make thing. You
Hmm.
know. Um, do you Jess have anything about why this game is evoking The Shining so much? Like Anya looks very much like Shelley Duvall.
Hmm.
Swansea running with. I mean, he says, I think it's something like "I'm coming for you, Jimmy," which here's Johnny is like the big line from
Mm.
one of the big lines from The Shining as he's running at you with an axe. Like I feel like there's a lot of overlap for sure.
Yeah. And the isolation, claustrophobic stuff, and the fact that they are just here to maintain something. They're not doing an important job here. Like, the folks in The Shining were just there to take care of the hotel in the off season, and like that's it. Just make sure the pipes don't burst, which is a very boring job with very low stakes, but it's like you're stuck in it. And I think like that's one of the reasons why like being on this space freighter is evoking that feeling too. I think it's just the classics work. Some things are tropes for a good reason. It's because they work narratively a lot of the time and symbolically a lot of the time. So I think a lot of the best horror media and games especially do like crib a lot from uh horror movies, especially Stephen King stuff. Obviously Silent Hill is a big pastiche of so many of these things. Uh, so I don't know. It's just one of those like share and share alike with themes sort of situation with horror.
I wonder. I wonder too if you could make an argument that The Shining is sort of like a story. This might just be after the fact now that they're connected. But I like The Shining is sort of the story of a man who thinks he's entitled to something he's not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's like Jack Nicholson's character. I forget Johnny. How did I forget his name? Is his name actually Johnny?
I don't
Uh,
think it is.
I
I
think it's.
don't remember
I
his
thought
name.
it is Jack.
Jack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jack.
all
Yeah,
work
He
and no
says,
yeah.
play
"Here's
makes
Johnny."
Jack a dull boy. Yeah, yeah. So Jack thinks he's sort of entitled to artistic genius, right? Like he thinks he should be writing the great American novel. And I think that's in part what leads him to go crazy. In the same way that like Jimmy thinks he's destined for greatness in a way that he very obviously is not.
Mm. And also just like his uh, there's a machismo
Hmm.
to blame for the madness of both of these characters, I believe. Um, and something that I think not everybody notices in The Shining is that Jack is the one that was hired to do this job, to take care of the hotel, and he brought his family with him. He's never seen doing any work. It's always Shelley Duvall doing anything to maintain the
Yes.
hotel. She's the one working. And I feel like Pony Express, similar situation. Like Jimmy's not doing much, and he's like so annoyed when he's asked to do anything. Anything. He like has a fucking fit at Anya for being like, oh, first it's do this, then it's grab that, then it's feed Curly his pills. Oh my god. Like
Yeah, it's also not immediately clear like what his day-to-day role. I mean, I know he's co-pilot,
yeah,
but
like what
like
do you do?
what does he do? Yeah.
Yeah, everyone else has a job. I don't know what you do besides sit next to your friend and fuck around all day and resent your friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Swansea keeps the ship running. Anya, technically, if anyone's hurt, she helps them. But even the like flying of the ship that Curly's doing, it's mostly just making sure that the course isn't messed up. Like
Mhm.
if nothing surprising happens, the captain and co-captain don't need to do anything. The ship flies itself. Um, but yeah, I think another thing with The Shining here is the alcoholism that
Mm.
is
Yeah.
going on. Like as soon as the mouthwash becomes available, Swansea is drinking himself stupid. Daisuke is as well. I don't remember if we see Anya partaking.
Anya
She thinks about
doesn't.
it.
She thinks
Yeah.
about it. And I think she doesn't because she's pregnant. I'm not super sure if that was the correct implication I picked up on that.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. And I think assuming that Jimmy is drinking the mouthwash too, at some points. So I also
There's
wonder
also
if some of it is like when Jack in The Shining starts losing his mind, he goes to a bar and gets offered a drink, and
Mhm.
one of the things from that movie is he injures his son early on while drunk, and then stays sober until the ghosts basically provide him alcohol, and then he starts losing his mind like more fully. So it seems like that theme of alcohol kind of causing an even further breakdown in this isolated environment replays in Mouthwashing.
there's a scene where when Anya first reveals her pregnancy to Curly, when she says a particular line, she says, I'm missing it a bit probably, but it's close enough. I want him out of here, or I don't want him in here anymore. And I was curious if she was referring to Jimmy or the child at that point, which he would be a strange choice if it was the child, but it at
Yeah, I
least
don't
made me
think it
pause and
was.
think about it. Yeah, you're probably
Mm,
right.
but
But I mean,
interesting
Jimmy
to think
can't
about.
go anywhere.
I mean, God, yeah, there's no brig, or at least no
Yeah,
access to a brig.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
And
only
like,
locks on 2 rooms.
yeah, and putting him in cryo is not really an option either.
yeah, and the cryo only lasts for like a year or something. They said like,
20
I
years.
thought it was
oh, is
20.
it 20?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
Yeah.
but
But I mean, then they're wasting a cryo on Jimmy,
yeah. Right.
you know? Who wants him to survive?
yeah,
Nobody. He shouldn't.
you shouldn't. It's just so many. There's no capacity. Even if Curly was capable of making a decision, like what is there other than violent justice for Jimmy? Like
Yeah.
you can't
Right.
just restrain him. There's rope, I guess. There isn't one length of nylon rope.
There's one rope on
on
the
the
whole
on the whole
whole
ship.
ship.
Yeah, so yeah, there's no capacity. You just kind of have to hope that these 5 people don't go insane on this trip.
Just like ridiculous oversights from the company. They just don't care.
No, the
Comedic.
mouthwash just needs to get there. The people barely do. Um, but yeah, so like we also get a few sequences like you have to cut a cake, and then next time up there's another birthday party, and you're Jimmy, and Curly is the cake,
Hmm.
and you cut his leg off,
Yeah.
and then that keeps cutting back and forth. Uh, ultimately,
It's implied that Jimmy eats parts of the leg.
yep. It's also implied. Well, it's not implied. Anya locks herself in the room with Curly and says that she'll take care of him once and for all. Jimmy and she locks one of the only 2 locking doors, um, and that causes Jimmy to convince Daisuke that they need to knock Swansea out so that they can go up through engineering into the nursing room because the med bay has a trapdoor basically that you can get into from engineering, um, which
And this
has
is the most dangerous tunnel on the ship for some reason. It's always been broken and sparking, and don't go in there. Oh my god, you'll die.
yep.
This is the danger tunnel we have on the ship.
Look, I don't know why we have a tunnel that is full of razor blades and
Yeah,
lightning,
like, what the
but
hell's in there, for God's sake?
but that's what's in there. And you have to knock Swansea out, so you make a spiked version of the cocktail, the forbidden
Yeah.
cocktail you're allowed to make once per trip.
A rubbing alcohol Mai Tai, more or less.
Hmm.
Rubbing alcohol mixed with mouthwash, Mai Tai.
Yeah.
It knocks him out
Delicious.
immediately. And then Daisuke climbs through after Jimmy like talks him up, like, "You got this, man. You're an engineer. You're gonna climb up this tunnel and you're gonna save everyone."
You're the
Yeah, really
coolest,
hypes
Dice
him up.
Guy.
He hypes him up so much, and then sends him to his fucking doom in the death tunnel.
Yeah, yeah, and he eventually Daisuke does manage to unlock the door while bleeding profusely. You find that Anya has killed herself. She's taken all of the pills. that were meant for Curly. Curly is missing, but that also could be hallucination stuff. Daisuke is super injured, and Jimmy's like, I can fix this, and Swansea's like, I can fix this, and then buries the axe into Daisuke's face
Which
because he's... Yep,
That's
go
a
ahead.
bit later.
Is that later?
Yeah, Daisuke is like bleeding out on the ground in his like little crappy bunk situation.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to use the mouthwash to like, disinfect his wounds,
yeah,
and
mouthwash his gaping neck
Mhm.
hole
it's
clean.
not good. And yeah, Swansea mercy kills this poor schmuck with the axe.
Which Swansea, like, not necessarily wrong in this case. Like, I don't necessarily approve of his methods, but Swansea's an interesting character insofar it seems like he's maybe decent, but
Mhm.
just has like too much trauma in his past at this point. Like he was an alcoholic for 15 years, his family fell apart, and he's stuck on this ship with all these flawed people as well. I feel like he's like well, Anya obviously, she's a victim certainly. But Swansea at least seems to be trying, but just can't quite hold it together.
Yeah, I feel like he probably does the most work on the ship too. Not only is he the engineer, but he also has to train another fucking person.
Yeah.
That's annoying. And he's got a very interesting relationship with Daisuke that seems like he, can't stand the little fucker. But by the end, you kind of realize that he did have a fondness for this kid, and he hated to do this to him, to ice him, to stop the suffering.
Yeah, and it also kind of shows that Swansea is thinking, this is what should have happened to Curly, right?
Yeah.
Like, they are... And Swansea, I think, implicitly by putting Daisuke down, is saying, like, look, we're screwed here. Like, having people who are not able-bodied, who we cannot feed, we cannot take care of. Like, who are you helping, right? You're not helping
There's
them
like
because they're not going to survive.
There's also an infinitesimally small chance they're going to be found literally ever in the infinite void of space and time. Like they are
Yeah.
way past lost, and nobody's going to even know they're missing until they don't show up at spaceport with all the mouthwash. And the company being defunct by the time they land, they're not going to go out to search for them. They are super dead from the instant
Yeah.
the game starts. Super
Yeah,
dead.
space is big. Like it's large.
Yeah, and they have a fax machine. Like, a fax machine that sends them messages. It doesn't seem like they can beam out, hey, a distress beacon or something, come get
Right?
me.
Yeah.
Their ship is completely messed up. Yeah, your point, Jess, about, like, no one will even know they're missing until they don't show up in 9 months. And then it doesn't seem like there's any way to get to them quickly, even if there was a way to know that they're missing.
Mm-hmm. And this
Um,
asteroid, goodness knows where that thing was headed. They're just hitching a ride on something going some other direction. They are
Oh, yeah.
beyond dead.
Yeah, assuming they are stuck to the asteroid, they are flying on its path. If it knocked part of the ship off and sent, they're just floating debris out there. Yeah, there's like no chance that they're getting found. And Swansea he's at least like, look, I'm going to drink myself to death because why not?
I
We're
would
dead
do it.
anyway.
He's the smartest person here, Swansea.
He's definitely the
If I
most
had
capable.
if I had the choice between starving to death with a bunch of assholes and just drinking myself to death, I would totally take the drinking to death one.
Yeah. And so things have gone sideways. Anya's dead. Daisuke is dead. Jimmy gets the gun that Anya locked away. And now he shoots Swansea, kills him, and it's just Jimmy and Curly. And you get a pretty long sequence of like using what is it? You get a device. It's not the scanner. You're scanning for a fetus at one point.
It's an ultrasound.
You get an
Yeah, an
ultrasound,
ultrasound.
right? Like you get an
In the
ultrasound.
hallucination, yeah.
In a hallucination, you carry Curly around for a little bit. You have another hallucination where you're like walking away from signs that say take responsibility or like don't look away. And you have to stare forward and walk backwards, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's also like TV, little like commercials about the company and food and stuff. Like there are 1950s, 60s cartoons that you occasionally watch on TV.
Yeah, like
Um,
public domain, like those like educational ones that were by like Jam Handy
mhm.
Productions and stuff like that. The ones that Mystery Science Theater riffed on a bunch. Uh,
Yeah.
that were just like, we have a lot of grant money. Let's make a bunch of educational videos, like how to ask someone out on a date. But these are
Mhm.
about like capitalism and jobs and stuff. They're like cartoons related to labor, and like one of them seemed to be like a scare thing against unions or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yep.
good shit.
Well, the company, a well-paying job will pay for your family, your leisure time, your health care, which is great. And yeah, you get one of these, and then, man, the final puzzle with Curly, uh,
Oh God.
where you need to feed him. Um, so
Feed him
Curly,
himself.
Yeah. You feed him
yeah,
a piece of his leg.
yeah, you need to turn. Curly is covered in knobs, basically.
Valves, yeah, like
Yeah. You're turning valves to make Curly's digestive tract line up so that the food goes to his stomach, and if it's not lined up correctly, he vomits on you. Um, yeah, you feed him his own leg.
I love
Uh,
this. I didn't love the puzzle aspect, but I loved the vibe of it. It was wonderful.
yeah, and then Jimmy carries Curly to the cryo chamber so that Curly will be the only survivor if any of them survive.
And Jimmy thinks that this is setting things right. This is what I do to set things right. I'm fixing it. And so he puts Jimmy in the cryo chamber and walks off screen and shoots himself in the head.
Yeah, and you
Yep.
hear it off camera
And
as
there's a
you
beat
are
for a
freezing.
second, and you're like, "Oh shit! Did he forget to hit the button that makes it go?"
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Oh, you just put me in here to die. And then like, oh, it comes on like, oh, thank God. Not that it fucking matters. Like, it's more likely that aliens find this guy on ice than any human finds them.
Yeah, and we're even taking that cryo freezing these people is like they can revive people from that.
God,
I
especially
feel
this
like
fucking guy. He's got no skin. It's gonna
yeah,
kill him.
Yeah.
like the dirty future that we're seeing in this game. I think it's pretty unlikely that those cryo chambers are anything but a placebo.
Yeah. Or that like
Mm.
this company would have paid for the real thing. It's probably like it would cost $20 more. They're like, I don't know about $20.
It's just a smoke machine. It's just some dry ice.
Yeah.
So that's mouthwashing. What a cool like 1, 2, maybe 3 hour game, depending on how quickly you play
Uh,
through it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think my first playthrough was 3 hours. Well, my
Yeah,
only playthrough, I guess, technically. But I watched my spouse play it, and he was also like 2 hours 40 minutes around there.
Yeah.
yeah, super cool
Allow
experience.
allow me to level a critique though.
Of
Please do.
course.
Sure. So I like appreciated what the game was doing like narratively and technically, but it didn't really grab me. And I think it's for two reasons. One is something that like I think a lot about in terms of like true crime, that like just because somebody does something terrible doesn't necessarily make them interesting. Like Jimmy's obviously a horrible, horrible person, but that's not like a compelling character. That's just a terrible person. And relatedly, the second problem is I don't like see any like change or transformation from Jimmy. Not that I wanted redemption. Jimmy obviously was beyond redemption. But the fact that he starts terrible, continues terrible, and ends terrible without any indication of what created this terribleness to begin with left me a little bit, I don't know, wanting a little less compelled than I might have been with a more complete arc for Jimmy. Like I said, I don't want redemption for Jimmy. I want to know what made Jimmy this way in the first place.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of inferring from the one conversation he has with Curly that just jealousy of Curly kind of
Yeah.
pushed him a lot. But we never see a version of Jimmy where he's not just a terrible piece of shit. You know,
Right, yeah.
it's
We don't
he's
have a baseline level of what is this guy on a normal day on Earth when he's not in a terrible situation in space and under a lot of stress. Maybe he is a more normal guy. You kind of have to infer from how people treat Jimmy, like what his deal is. And I think, Curly being friends with this asshole, like, what
Yeah,
does
what's
that
Curly's
mean?
deal too?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what's your deal to be friends with this guy? And I think it's saying a lot about like it's not nepotism, but like just how easy it is for dudes to just be unqualified for stuff and just have an in and you get a job and you're responsible for all these people. Like that's like criminal. Like Jimmy should not be here under any circumstances. And he wouldn't be if Curly didn't enable him every step of the way and ignore all these seemingly little problems. And that's a big
Yeah.
theme going on too with like the dead pixel in the screen. Like once you see it, it's the only thing you can see. And Curly's like, oh, I'll go crazy looking for it, but I don't see it. It's like, yeah, you don't see it. What a shock.
Yeah. Yeah, and we definitely get that sense. And I think, Pete, also to your point, like, I think Silent Hill 2 is maybe the only other game we've played with a protagonist who is as bad of a person as Jimmy is here. But in that game, they make a pretty good, they make a pretty big attempt at saying, okay, James was not always someone who
Right.
would do something terrible to his spouse. Like, he was someone who couldn't cope with what illness was doing to his spouse, and he was self-absorbed and flawed in all these ways. But we have the implication that there was a person here who was at one point a loving husband.
Well, I think a big difference is that you're supposed to empathize in some way with James.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big difference with Jimmy. Wow, they're both Jimmys when you think about it. That's weird. Um, hmm. uh, but like, it's always interesting to play somebody who isn't the hero. And I think that's something that threw people off about Silent Hill 2 and made it so memorable is that you're assuming this must be a good guy. He loves his wife, right? And I think with Jimmy, it's also a situation where like the narrative is kind of at first like misdirecting you because you assume that what you're being told is true and not a cover up. Like Curly did this and this guy's just really stressed out. And you get inklings further along as you go, like, wait a minute, this guy sucks. This guy's bad at this. What the fuck?
Yeah.
And you start realizing that everyone's treating Jimmy this way for a good reason. And I think like the arc is more about you like cluing in on this. And like when you play the game again or watch somebody else play it, like those signs are actually there the whole time and you didn't quite notice it because you're giving the character the benefit of the doubt. Like we're used to playing, pretty noble protagonists, generally speaking, justified people, because they're easier to empathize with, I believe. So I think it's really interesting that this game is not interested in making you empathize with this guy. They're interested in stripping away that empathy over time.
Fair. Yeah, maybe my critique is that like I'm not interested in Jimmy because I think we fall into like a Gurren Lagann problem where like once he's cutting off people's legs and feeding them to them, it's just like an escalation of cruelty and violence that I'm not interested in. Like I said, like doing increasingly terrible things isn't very narratively compelling. But the point you make about sort of the environmental cues we're overlooking at the beginning and are only sort of visible in retrospect becomes a much more interesting way to view the game. That like it's not necessarily that I should care anything about Jimmy really. What I should be more interested in is my own blind spots in playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
also
really
that's a much more interesting reading.
I also think that like Jimmy is trying to, give himself a redemption arc. He's desperate to be
Yeah, he is.
he's desperate to be justified in this. He's like, I'll take care of it. I'll take responsibility. I'll fix all of this. Completely in denial of what, caused this. He did this. And like that is interesting to see to play a protagonist that is so desperate to be a protagonist and Super is not the protagonist at all. Nobody's the protagonist here. Everybody is like a victim or a jerk in some way.
Yeah, he's a firefighter who sets fires. He's an arsonist firefighter.
Yeah, right. Like
He's creating problem. He would rather create a problem that he can then present himself as the hero of, than simply acknowledge the terrible things he has done and take that responsibility. Take the responsibility as a criminal, as someone who has done something awful
Right.
to the people around him. And even when he is in, even when everything's in decline, he can't just be magnanimous. Okay, I screwed everything up. Okay, I'm gonna help. He has to give Anya just terrible grief for having help with feeding pills to the person who he put in bandages. Like,
yeah.
he can't even treat his fellow, I don't know, inmates. Like, well, I don't even know what to call them at that point. His coworkers. Like, he can't treat them with respect. He can't treat Daisuke and Swansea like people who, look, these are going to be his final moments, are these months with these people, and he can't treat them with respect, because he wants to be the hero of this story. Yeah, it's
There's also
definitely
just,
interesting.
There's a lot of denial going on in this,
Yeah.
and it's not just from Jimmy, although
No.
the lion's share of it's from Jimmy. Like, the whole crew is a little bit in denial about like their survival chances, and I think like that wears them down over time as it dawns on them like there's no way out of this. We are actually definitely going to die. And Jimmy the entire way through is like, no, it's going to be fine. I'll take responsibility. I'm the captain. I'm the hero. And yeah, like him, like you said, like I don't want a redemption arc for the guy, but I think like it's like an anti-redemption arc. Like, you start by assuming he's probably a good guy. He probably wants to help people, and then through time you're like, oh no, he sucks.
Yeah, he 100% sucks.
Yep.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on mouthwashing?
I like the weird horse stuff. Even the parts I don't super understand thematically, I still like it.
I'm
That
gonna
is-
swear off mouthwash forever.
It
Obviously,
sounds like you
it's the
didn't
problem.
use it anyway.
No, not so much, to be honest.
Everyone, brush your teeth, floss, just
Yeah,
have
do
some
that.
mouthwash. Yeah.
If you brush your teeth, you won't ever have to experience what happens to these people in this game.
That's the lesson you should walk away from this game with. Oral hygiene is very important.
That it is. Look, Curly might not have lips, and he might not be in control of his jaw, but man, are those chompers clean.
Mhm. Boy,
Yeah,
howdy.
he has beautiful teeth. Not gonna lie.
All right. Well, Pete, it is your turn to pick the next game we cover.
Oh gosh, I was unprepared for this eventuality.
Oh no.
It
Give me
happened.
a second.
There's an order. We do it.
I know.
Have you played? I think I might have asked this already on a different podcast, so forgive me if I have and I've forgotten. Have you played the Beginner's Guide?
No, we have not.
Whoa! Whoa! Big oversight. Howdy.
I mean, is that what we need? Did we just get a recommendation? I'm willing to cede my time.
Yo, have me back for that episode. I just like ruined the fucking waveform getting stoked about that. It's like, I fucking adore this game so fucking hard. You know how like on like Blue Sky there'll be like trends like, oh, here's 4 games to play to get to know me, and it's just like, it's just somebody's 4 favorite games. It's not like getting to know them. It's just like, yeah, Majora's Mask is fucking cool. Of course it is. But like, I don't feel like I know you because of this game. The Beginner's Guide for me is like, if you play this game, you know me better. This is like my Sir Davy Reedon, get out of my head is all I can say.
Well, Gino, in honor of Jess being so magnanimous as to appear on the podcast multiple times, why don't we cede a week to the Beginner's Guide? Since
That
I'm
sounds good.
unprepared anyway.
Yes.
From the creator of the Stanley Parable,
Yes.
The Beginner's Guide, and I think this will be a good one for M to comment on, because I believe this game is a lot about game design. So excellent.
Hell
So
yeah.
next up, The Beginner's Guide. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jess.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you, dear listeners. Till next time, peace.